Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us on this glorious, glorious evening. This evening I'm going to discuss complex motorcycling injury and rehabilitation. And as I say, I'm delighted and thrilled to be joined by Jimmy Millar, a former favourite client. So I'll just do some of the introductions before I introduce you to Jimmy, because I think this is all about Jimmy's story, which is incredibly interesting. And I think it just gives you the measure of the man, a proud man, a stoical man. So I'll just tell you a wee bit initially about what we're going to talk about. So there we are there. For those of you who don't know us or maybe new to our webinars, we are first and foremost qualified solicitors, vastly experienced at what we do, but we're also motorcyclists, and I think that does make a difference. We're Scotland's only firm that specialises in motorcycling collisions, and we do that from this background. We do what you do. So that's a little bit about us. Moving along, there's me. I didn't know Rod was pulling these together, and I went, oh my goodness. So just a few snippets. I'm out there quite a lot. I very much enjoy riding my motorcycle. I'm a member of IAM. And as I say, if I'm out there doing what you do, it gives me that insight. It enables me to argue your cause, to stand by you and to support you, because I understand what it's like, as do the rest of the motorcycling lawyers, which is, you know, to my mind, incredibly important. We cover the whole of Scotland. I was going to say from 4 different offices, but I think I'm probably correct by saying from 16 different homes at the moment. As I say, our job, what we do is we come to you, so you don't need to come to us. And I think, you know, I suppose one of the positive things, if there can be, about the current pandemic is that we've all learned to adapt. Zoom calls are brilliant, and that's the way that we communicate with our clients at the moment. But as I say, we always made it our mission to go to you. If you need us, we go to you. And that is very, very important. And Jimmy might tell you a little bit about that. So moving along swiftly, the stats. Okay, motorcyclists make up 1% of road traffic, yet 18% of deaths. And we're also massively overrepresented when it comes to serious injuries. 92% of crash victims are male, and interestingly, 83% of accidents occur in good weather. And unfortunately, one of the most dangerous places to ride in Scotland is in fact the A82. So what happens is that as a solicitor, we unfortunately see so many injured motorcyclists at the low point. Their lives have been turned upside down through no fault of their own. They can be broken, they don't know where to turn to. And we always made it our mission that whatever else we did, we had to put the client at the very center of the process. And as I say, it's a long road to rehabilitation. And in the initial stages, we do see our clients at a very low point. Next slide. Complex injuries. These are the types of injuries that motorcyclists will often suffer from. Jimmy will describe his, but it's what we call polytrauma, which means multiple orthopedic injury, serious spinal injury, brain injury. Brachial plexus is actually very, very common injury that motorcyclists can suffer, where, you know, nerves are wrenched and can leave you with a dead man's arm. Incredibly painful as well. Amputation is another, unfortunately, common injury. And these mean that what we need to do is to take our clients with us to ensure that we get rehabilitation. And that's what tonight is actually all about. Next slide, please. It's going to be about Jimmy Millar, one man's journey. And if I can just introduce Jimmy, and ask you, Jimmy, to tell us a little bit about Jimmy Millar pre-accident. Rod, next slide, please. On you go, Jimmy.
Well, pre-accident, as you can probably see, I was a truck driver there. That's me on the left-hand side at the top. When I was only young, I worked for my dad, running to France and Germany and wherever else, till my dad retired. Then I moved on to driving for Shell, and I remained there until my accident. Then that's me with Gillian getting married just a couple of years before my accident. That's next slide is my Triumph Thruxton in calendar. I just been to the Green Welly. That's me coming back. Stopped there, and it's quite ironic because since I've had my accident, I'm actually there every other day emptying that parking machine, and I always think of that photograph. Next to that is Windy Millar. That's when Gillian and myself went to Arran 1 week before my accident, and then the next week was the worst week of my life, basically. So that's kind of me.
And if we move along to the next slide, Jimmy, and, I'm sorry about this. This is, the crash scene, what happened. So maybe if you can tell us what happened that day. And as we see, it's glorious weather.
That day, it was the 23rd of August, 2015. I'd made arrangements the night before, as I always did on the Saturday night. I met my friends first thing on Sunday morning in calendar. I'd fueled my motorbike up in Stirling, so I was heading up. We went to the Green Welly. Well, we were heading up to the Green Welly, and my friend that's actually kneeling over me there, he decided that the Green Welly breakfast was too dear, so £2 cheaper at Glencoe. So we went to Glencoe instead. And when we were in Glencoe, we were talking to these two people with the yellow tops on. They're Dutch people. And they left and they went away down the road. We came down the road. We went into the Green Welly. I had a coffee. We decided to leave there about 12:15, I think it was in the day. I was heading back to get Gillian to go out for some lunch. And as I'm heading here towards the Licks Toll, that red car, I just seen this red car just cut right across in front of me. And next thing, I just can remember seeing stars. And that was my world changed forever on that very day.
And I think, Jimmy, an air ambulance had to come for you because your injuries were so severe, and you also arrested at the scene, but also in the ambulance.
From what I can remember, Brenda, of that day, when I hit the car, I was right underneath the car, and my friends pulled me from underneath it. I was really struggling to breathe. I couldn't breathe, and I was shouting, "Can you take my helmet off? Take my helmet off!" And they wouldn't take my helmet off, so they slackened it. And I pulled it off, and I could remember that, and I flung it away across the road. And I wasn't bad. I was really bad. I knew I wasn't very good. My leg was all bent, as you can probably see there. I was really struggling for breath. And the reason that these photographs got taken, this couple in front of the red car, they said to my other friend, "Go and take as many photographs as you possibly can, because people change their statements and things like that. But if you've got a record of where everything is at the time, you'll be able to use it." Hopefully. So, and that's why we took the photographs. That's why he took the photographs. And anyway, I was lying there, and about 10 minutes later or so, the ambulance from Cullen turns up, and he said to me, "Jimmy, you're in a bad way. We're going to have to get the air ambulance for you." So I was there for a while. They were putting fluids into me and gave me oxygen and stuff like that. Next thing, the air ambulance turned up, and then I can't really remember an awful lot after that. They said to me that the helicopter couldn't land on the road here, had to land in a field. They were going to put me in the back of the ambulance to take me to the helicopter, and then that's me. I just checked out after that. I can't remember anything. Seemingly, I had a cardiac arrest in the back of the ambulance, and the crew off the helicopter, they restarted my heart, got me going again, got me stabilized, took me to the helicopter, and then I had another cardiac arrest before they flew me to Glasgow. Flew me to Glasgow, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Took me in there, and then I was in resus, and I had a heart attack in there, and then I kind of woke up the next day and had no recollection of really what had happened. The first thing I said to Gillian was I dead yesterday? And I didn't actually know it was yesterday. I just said, was I dead? And she says, why would you ask that question? But that's kind of where I was. So I had no idea what had happened or anything. So.
And I think, you sustained multiple injuries, Jimmy, and I can just describe them. You had fractured to the C7 vertebrae up at the top, multiple rib fractures on your right side, punctured lung, that left-sided pneumothoraces, fracture to your thoracic vertebrae, a fractured dislocation to your right clavicle, double fracture to the femur, biggest bone in your body. And as you say, the dissected right coronary artery, which was, heart difficulties as well and damage to the liver. And you spent some considerable time in hospital. And as I say, Jimmy, that was from hospital to home. Can you tell us about the transition from hospital to home?
Hospital to home, I'd spent 32 days in hospital. I think I'd spent 3 weeks in Glasgow and the rest in Larbar. And then one day, Gillian wheeled me to the canteen in Larbar, and we were coming back, and the nurses said to Gillian, you better keep that wheelchair because he's going home. And we had nothing prepared. Gillian had nothing prepared. We had no idea. We didn't even know how we was going to get home. And then my son, Stephen, he turned up, and we managed to organise it. We got home, Gillian's twin sister and my brother-in-law, they were here. They had organised some things to help me, but it was a nightmare. We came back, we had no food. Gillian had no food because she'd been that used to going back and forward to the hospital to see me. We were not prepared at all, I've got to say. It was quite hard. I probably shouldn't have got home when I did get home. So.
Indeed not. And I think, this is very important because at that stage, Jimmy, you hadn't made any contact with me as yet. And one of the first things we would always do as specialist lawyers is make sure that before you're discharged home, there's support in place. And that's all to do with the appointment, the early appointment of a case manager. And in your case, we appointed Caroline Gregory from Independence Works. And just to let the audience who's listening in, what's a case manager? Well, a case manager is an individual, often an OT or a nurse, from an independent rehabilitation company. And we would always ask the third-party insurer to work with us to address an individual's needs by way of rehabilitation, because that's the most important thing, is putting the individual at the center of the process. We all need to work together to rebuild lives. And we brought on board Caroline Gregory to assist Jimmy to look at rehabilitation. And I think, Jimmy, for you, this was very much the long journey toward recovery, that long and winding road. If you can tell us a bit about the case manager and how she pushed you and what that was like.
Well, Caroline, I remember the day Caroline turned up to my house. She's a very tall lady, Caroline, and she came in and she come up with some suggestions for me and whatever. But in Caroline's defence, she was fantastic. She looked after it. She made sure I got everything I needed and everything. If I asked her for something, she would go bend over backwards to try and get it for me and get it sorted. Honestly, I have a lot of respect for Caroline for what she did for me. Definitely, she was fantastic. She pushed me to the limit, and a lot of times I didn't want to do it, and I was really quite stubborn, and I'd lost all my motivation. But she kept at me and kept at me and kept at me, and it worked. But I was one of the guys. I had to get it in my head first. I was going to get better before I could get better. And that was my problem. Once I got that fixed out, I was fine. I managed to get myself better. So, but I had to really work, I've got to say.
What you said is something incredibly interesting, and this is to do with both mind and body. You went through this terribly traumatic event and did suffer post-traumatic stress disorder too. And I think, also you're coping with multiple injuries, and recovering from a polytrauma does take 4 to 5 years. Ask any orthopedic surgeon and they will say the biggest problem that you have with polytrauma is fatigue. And it is very difficult. You can't separate out mind and body. You have to ensure that, the individual motorcyclist who's been so horribly injured is supported both in relation to psychological support, because if you get the mind into the right place, it does help. And I think, Caroline was able to, access private physiotherapy, anything, to help you in that road to recovery.
Oh, Caroline was excellent, honestly. She came up with a few suggestions, and I sometimes poo-pooed them, but she would talk me into it, and I would go and do it. And I would always say, Caroline, you were right. You were spot on. And she was right. She knew what she was doing, and everything that she did for me she did in my interest. And it was, honestly, she was fantastic in that regard. She made sure. I said to her, "What about going to the gym or swimming?" And she says, "I'll make sure you get." She got me a gym membership, everything. I went to the gym. In fact, I was in the gym that many times. I was in first name terms with all the people in the door. So they knew me when I came in. That's how much everything went for me, if you know what I mean. But it wasn't easy, I've got to say, for anybody, if it would happen to, it's no easy. You've got to want to try and get to where you've got to get to, and you've got to push yourself. But you can do it if you try, that's for sure.
And there was a setback in all of this, Jimmy, because you did lose your job as a tanker driver, and your job was very important to you. I know you, I know your wife, Gillian, as I say, a proud and private man who'd always provided for his family. And I think you did find it difficult, that transition, relying upon your wife to support you. And these are very much low points, but as I say, working, even looking at voluntary types, trying to get back into some kind of work.
I found that very hard. When I lost my job, I never thought it would come to that. I would lose my job, but I did. But the reason I'd lost my job is because I'd lost my HGV license. The DVLA had took my HGV license off me because I'd had a heart attack and things like that, and I could not get it back. I wasn't fit enough. I couldn't go through the tests that they wanted me to do. So my company basically just let me go. It wasn't. I wouldn't say it was their fault. That it just was one of the things. But it happened, and I was gutted. I drove a lorry for 33 years at that time or something, and I was absolutely gutted. I didn't think I would ever get back to being the guy I was, to be quite honest. But I think I have. I've done pretty well, I've got to say.
You certainly have. And during all this time, Jimmy, I was coming backwards and forwards, seeing you at home, and I always enjoyed my visits. And this is the role that the solicitor takes on to, as I say, put the client at the center of the process. And that involves you using our skill and expertise. And of course, with you, Jimmy, there were so many medical experts we had to instruct. You had neuropsychologists because of a traumatic brain injury, the orthopedic surgeons who put you back together again, the cardiologist, the psychiatrist with the post-traumatic stress disorder, because of the pneumothorax, well, multiple, a respiratory physician and a pain consultant, because coping with pain and getting pain medication right is incredibly important. And if we move on to the next slide, this is why there's a huge responsibility, for lawyers like myself, is that serious injury means what we call serious scheduling. It's really important to make sure that when you're valuing up a claim, to begin with, you work with your client with rehabilitation to support them through the dark days. And then your job is to make sure that you've instructed, you look at your medical experts. In this case, for Jimmy, we had an employment expert, a pension expert. If you've lost your job, then there's a pension loss. Importantly, needs and care. And this one, funny one in here is orthotics. A femur fracture can often lead to leg length shortening, which will give you an altered gait. And unless that's sorted, you get constant back pain. So these are the sorts of things that we look at. And often we can have as much as 25 separate heads of claim. Now, I'm not going to go through them all. You've got your pain and suffering, your pension loss. You've got perhaps care costs. What about therapies in future? Physiotherapy, orthotics, podiatry. A lot of injured people can't bend down, for example, and do their toenails. And I don't think you could either, Jimmy.
No, I had to go and get podiatry for a while. Exactly, I did, yes.
And nobody thinks about that, the future cost of podiatry. There can be accommodation costs. So for example, looking to alter bathrooms to make them wet rooms because people can't step over the showers. And these are the sorts of things that we look at when we're valuing up a claim.
My
You know,
garden, if you remember rightly, that was
oh,
you
I
always
do
comment on my
remember your
garden.
garden. It was like the Himalayas. So pull down kitchen racking, level access shower was really important. And so even if you can imagine, you know, multiple injuries, even making yourself pouring a hot kettle can be quite dangerous. So we look at factoring in these things. A profiling bed, you know, those who are injured do want to share that double bed with their partner. There's comfort in that, but of course, through pain, it's altered and you can't. And so, a profiling bed allows both parties to sleep comfortably. And I do remember, Jimmy, your landscaping, you had a garden like the Himalayas. So, we looked at factoring in landscaping, gardening for you to ensure that, you know, everything was factored into the future. Now, ultimately, we came up, I worked away with Jimmy in the background, also with a third party insurer, and we managed to build the case and a full valuation. And these were the sorts of things that lots of lawyers don't think about. And at the end of the day, we managed to secure a good offer for you, Jimmy. And what difference did that make to you?
Well, that made it to me, Brenda, as you know. I remember the day you called me. It was a Wednesday. I was actually on the food train here, which is on the left-hand slide, delivering food for the mall people. I volunteer there on a Tuesday, and a Wednesday. And you phoned me, you told me the amount, and I said to you, if you remember, I said I loved you and whatever, because I didn't think I would ever secure that kind of amount, and I just knew that would be me secure for the rest of my life. After that, I went, Caroline again, she got me into going to learning again. I was learning things. I ended up getting a job with the council, which I really enjoy. I only work 3 days a week, which is good. It's quite enough for me, and it keeps me off the street. Nothing else. And then the next photograph is myself and Gillian. We went away to Barbados, and this was my friend here that I met when I was in Barbados. So she was entertaining me that evening. So it was good. My life has really changed completely. I didn't think my life would be as good as what I've got it to, but I've got you to thank for that, and lots of other people to thank for that. I never ever thought I would get to where I got to, that's for sure, definitely.
I know it's one of these strange things, and this is Jimmy and myself, a charity bowl to raise money for the Scottish charity Air Ambulance, and of course we donated through Jimmy a sum of money to them to thank them very much, because ultimately those minutes, the minutes that you saved your life, Jimmy. And for us as a law firm, it is exactly that, meeting individuals, unfortunately, at their lowest point, but working with them, concentrating on rehabilitation. There's things that can be done, and they can be offered that through the private sector, support, even looking at alternative types of employment. Jimmy went back initially to voluntary employment because it's important for somebody to feel valued. And I think I always say to people, they feel so much better when I'm out of their life, because my job was to ensure that there's financial security for the future to give them the options that they deserve. For so many injured motorcyclists, it is a torrid journey through rehabilitation. And we take our responsibility incredibly seriously. And I must say, it's been a pleasure to be, and an absolute honor to represent you, Jimmy, and the many, many clients that I do represent. I'm passionate about what I do, the entire firm is. And I think this maybe gives you a flavor as to what we do. Yes, the injuries are complex, but working together, there can be light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you. And Jimmy, thanks a million. You're a star.
No, I always said I would be of assistance to you at one point. So I always said that to you. So
Thank you. So that's all. If anybody's got any questions for Jimmy or for myself, please let me know.
Brilliant. Yes, I perhaps should have said that at the beginning. First of all, thank you, Brenda and Jimmy. That was fascinating. And it's so nice that you've come through that long journey and popped out the far side, Jimmy, and looking so well, you and Gillian, and enjoying life. So that just makes Brenda's job, our old job, worthwhile. So yeah, we've got a few questions coming in here. First one's from Michael. He's saying, if involved in an accident where the other side admits liability, they settle for costs and damages based upon the injuries and the case is closed. How about if years later the injuries prove to have a greater impact on quality of life? Is it possible to get back for more damages? Is there a time limit? I think you can answer that one, Brenda.
This is very important and a very, very good question. You get one bite at the cherry. Simple. So when you settle your case, that is it. And that's why with Jimmy, it was 2.5 years because we got interim payments, so there was no financial suffering. You get one bite at the cherry. There can be a tendency from some solicitors to rush it. Never rush a complex case, because one of the, I think, worst things is with some orthopedic injuries, particularly fractures across a joint surface, can lead to arthritis in the future. And that arthritis can develop such that you will need to have bones fused. And if you're a keyboard operator and have your bones fused, that's going to make a big difference. So one bite at the cherry. So you've got to make it the biggest bite you can possibly get. And that's why you need a very experienced lawyer working for you. Ask them about their experience in complex injury cases, because if you settle your case, you can't go back for more later.
I would just like to say something there, Brenda. Well, I speak to a lot of people about my accident, and that's what I'll say to them. They'll say, how did you go on and whatever. I said, well, I was referred to a panel solicitor. But as soon as I got out of hospital, the day I got out of hospital, the next day I called you, and that's what I said. The very first thing you should do is get yourself a good lawyer, and that's exactly what I did. So, and that's how I got the care and attention that I needed at that time. So,
good decision. Neil, I think you've asked a similar question to Michael around that. You have one bite at the cherry, so Brenda's answered that. Jimmy, you've had a lot of positive comments from Andrea and Paul and David, who thank you for sharing your story. Horrific accident, and delighted that you got through it and have come out the far side. And one other question from Michael, actually, and I know the answer to this, but has Jimmy ever been back on a bike?
No, my wife would divorce me for a start. So, but that's not to say I don't miss it. I miss it passionately, but I couldn't trust anybody. My trust is gone on the road, basically. You know what I mean? I just couldn't trust anybody. I couldn't put myself through that again. No way. No, I would love to, but I couldn't. No.
I think that's a really interesting point, Jimmy, because there you were, a professional driver, a tanker driver, a very competent, careful motorcyclist. And in that split second, there's nothing you could have done. And that's where your trust is not so much the trust in your ability, it's trusting others. And that's, you know, as I say.
That's the problem, but you're right, Brenda. It's a trust in other people, not myself. It's a trust in others. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for answering that. Okay, is there any other questions? If there aren't any further questions, which I don't think there are, I just once again like to thank you, Jimmy, for joining us this evening. It's been brilliant to have you with us, and to Brenda also, obviously, for sharing and talking with Jimmy. I think that's been a really, really interesting session, and it's just explains what it's like when there are some catastrophic injuries that have to be dealt with, unfortunately, when riding motorcycles. So thank you once again, and look forward to maybe seeing you all next week, Thursday, 6 o'clock. I'm not sure what we've got on next week, but look out for the communication and we'll tell you. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.